Spirit of Christmas, Suddenly Serene. Hope for the Holidays series, Book 2. Written by Michele Pollock Dalton. Narrated by Barr. Chapter 1. The mix of pilfered barbiturates and painkillers mounted on her nightstand cajoled Stacy with a powerful promise of nothingness. Carefully culled from the nurse's med carts over a series of months, the pharmaceutical bonanza was evidence of Stacy's deliberate and systematic plan, the final blueprint for a life wrecked beyond redemption. Darkness crept across the sky earlier each day as winter bore down on the barren landscape outside the window. But Stacy didn't mind. The deepening dusk mirrored the condition of her spirit, bitter cold and fastly fading. After months of turmoil engendered by an unexpected breakup and the chaos of a worldwide lockdown, the encroaching holiday season was another disenfranchised mess of swirling thoughts and emotions. Fortunately, it was a calamity Stacy would avoid if everything went according to plan. Determined to find absolution with a dignified end, Stacy made one last walk through the cookie-cutter townhouse she rented. Conscientiously, she emptied the refrigerator and gave the house a thorough cleaning. That would make things easier for whoever had to pack up the few things Stacy received in the divorce settlement. Beyond that, all that was left to do was turn down the thermostat. As the final bit of preparation, Stacy placed the matter-of-fact farewell letter she penned on her laptop case. Content with her arrangements, the melancholy lady smoothed a hand over the outfit purchased especially for the occasion. Sitting on the edge of the bed, Stacy began to take the random assortment of pills one by one. By the fourth pill, Stacy began to get groggy, the potent dosage of benzodiazepines drowning out the fierce sorrow that called for a swift and painless end. Clumsily plucking two of the opioid pain relievers from the stash, Stacy lifted her wine glass in mocking toast to a shattered life. Her education, the career she excelled at, even the family ties forged through the years seemed like cruel barbs, avid reminders of all the unrealized dreams Stacy still craved. Bits of fractured consciousness, random memories of catechism classes flitted about her tortured mind as the ability to think or reason faded. Wonderful counselor, Prince of Peace, Stacy slowly slurred. Who? Her mushy brain questioned. Who is my prince? Certainly not the man that closed his heart to Stacy's need for reconciliation. Recent, indiscriminate hookups also failed to live up to the princely standard. So, who? I will keep you in perfect peace, a soft voice whispered. The woozy woman slowly rolled her head toward the source of the sound, but there was nothing there besides the haloed glow of the nightlight. And music, the ringtone, Stacy's Mom by Fountains of Wayne, started to play. A rush of awareness displaced some of the drug-induced haze, and Stacy attempted to reach her phone. Suddenly, a fervent desire to hear her mother's voice one last time overwhelmed the desperate daughter. Mom? She mumbled as she answered. Honey, I can barely hear you, Ruth responded before rapidly continuing. Charlie was just taken to the hospital. Struggling to focus on the conversation, Stacy lolled about until she was upright. With arms draped haphazardly over her lap, she tried to prop up her sagging body. What, Mom? What? Stacy stuttered. Charlie fell on the front steps and cracked his tailbone. I couldn't get him back up, so I called the ambulance, Ruth frantically relayed. I think he might have broken his back. After years of heartache and failed relationships, her mother finally found one of the good guys. Charlie was a recent addition to their family and a steadfast traditionalist, but he was a kind-hearted man. In fact, it was a bit of a shock when the hardy fellow swooped Stacy up into a bone-bending bear hug the first time they'd met the previous Christmas. Stacy lifted a trembling hand to her face, then shook her head to clear it. Oh, she feebly gasped as the motion threatened to violently unleash everything she'd swallowed earlier. Mom, Mama? Stacy stammered, a frantic cry building behind the bile. I'm going to be sick. On her end of the call, Ruth clasped a hand over her mouth as retching sounded on the other end. Delicate lines etched around her mouth, and eyes deepened as concern welled, and Ruth felt helpless in the face of her family's misery. Oh, honey, are you all right? She questioned when silence fell heavy across the airwaves. I don't think so, Mama, Stacy anxiously blubbered, a youthful intonation making the proclamation far more telling than the woman intended. Chapter 2. Disgruntled by the necessary precautions engendered by travel restrictions, Stacy yanked the mask away from her face as soon as she cleared the airport terminal doors. Her pasty complexion and hampered gross motor skills spoke of her recently foiled suicide attempt, but a skilled emergency room physician guaranteed she still walked among the living, and frankly, if her mother's frantic call hadn't interrupted the perfectly executed scheme, Stacy would be blissfully resting in the void between time and eternity. Instead, Stacy found herself enraged and foul-mouthed as fellow travelers jostled her. During the flight from Tennessee, the soothing effects of alcohol offered the barest of succor. Unfortunately, the resultant intoxication was inadequate to cloak the raw emotion that bubbled beneath the surface. With Thanksgiving mere weeks away, her responsibility was clear. Ruth's distress call took precedence over whatever peaceful conclusion Stacy hoped to achieve. Duty before desire, she hotly lamented under her breath. Hey, over here, Nugget. Aggravated by the use of the childhood nickname, Stacy turned to find her brother's sheepish gaze. Hi to you too, Dumbo. Darren's floppy ears turned a startling shade of fuchsia at the despised moniker. Easy there, Broadzilla. No harm, no foul. Calling someone of limited stature a people McNugget will get you kicked in the shin, Darren Finseth, Stacy warned the bane of her childhood existence. After shoving a handful of strawberry blonde hair over her shoulder, Stacy shot one half of the terrible twosome a questioning look. Well, are we just going to hang out at the airport? Darren flipped a single-fingered salute and collected the baggage. Lead the way, sister dearest, he peevishly suggested. As they climbed into the forest green pickup, Stacy archly queried, Where's Derek? The youngest of her twin brothers was rarely around, but somehow Stacy thought he might show up for her ignominious homecoming. In the wind, Darren lowly replied, tension tightening the muscles across his chest. He ever make it to Hope Springs last year like he promised? No, just figured with the lockdown he stuck closer to home, Stacy answered as the familiar scenery of Michigan's Upper Peninsula raced past her window. Besides, I kind of blanked it out when things fell apart with Peter. A grimace flitted across Darren's weathered face. Sorry that didn't work out, Stace. You had some good years together, though. That's something to cherish. Disgruntled by the mention of her ex, Stacy nervously fiddled with one of the oversized buttons on her wool jacket. Yeah, I suppose, she grumbled. So, Darren prompted. What happened? Stacy stilled. Her fingers stopped worrying the button, and she tightly clamped her hands in her lap. I don't want to talk about it. You think Mom is going to let it go, Nugget? One day you're on top of the world. The next? Well, we've got no idea what happened. Just some cooked-up excuses and lame brush-offs. Bristling, Stacy shouted. I said I don't want to talk about it. All right, little Miss Hotshot. Keep your secrets. But I'm telling you right now, Mom's going to get it out of you one way or another, so you might as well come clean. Warm light poured from the evenly staggered windows of the ranch-style house, and the narrow porch that ran along the length of the residence was decked with evergreen bows and red ribbons. Evocative of a Norman Rockwell painting, the scene was wrapped in holiday splendor, but Stacy still felt the icy fingers of discontent wrapped firmly around her heart. The picture-perfect home that her mother and stepfather made was truly idyllic, and the surrounding Christmas tree farm lent beauty to the scene. A few diligent workers scurried around the pristine white outbuildings, propelled by urgency as preparations focused on saving the upcoming Yuletide season. Although there was a small orchard on the property, the lion's share of income was earned in the 10 weeks before Christmas. With the door to October firmly closed, the countdown to solvency or ruin was well underway. So, in her analytical way, Stacy packaged her pain and hid it in the recesses of her brain. Determined to meet the Herculean challenges left in the wake of Charlie's fall, Ruth rejoiced at Stacy's willingness to help. When her daughter left home a decade earlier to marry, Ruth resigned herself to the fact that Stacy might never return. The small town of Magellan was essentially Michigan's last outpost before the land gave way to Lake Superior, and with Stacy's dogged ambition driving her pursuits, well, Magellan simply wasn't big enough to hold all the girl's dreams. But now, one of her prodigals returned with a wan, world-weary smile that hid very little. Approaching her wary daughter, Ruth inquired, "How are you feeling, Cupcake? Are you sure you're up to all this?" Profound relief surged through Ruth's system when Stacy returned the gentle hug. Although they'd always maintained a stable relationship, the overwhelming upheaval from the previous year stood guard between them. With practicality that often marked her as unfriendly, Stacy answered, "You can't handle all this alone, Mom. And with Charlie laid up, you need to focus your attention on him." Stacy's shrewd gaze roamed the forested landscape. "Darren needs to get back to Detroit, and apparently Derek's gone to who knows where. That leaves just me." Chapter 3. An unapologetic city girl, Stacy balked at the ungodly timing of the wake-up call her mother issued the next morning. "The sun isn't even up yet," she grumbled to the coffee mug. Averting her gaze, Stacy tried to hide her red-rimmed eyes from Ruth's knowing glance. Despite Stacy's determination to carry on for a little while longer, the open wounds of rejection and despair refused to abate, and nightmares based on Stacy's fantastical theories about the reasons for her breakup stole whatever oblivion sleep might provide. As much as Ruth wanted to question Stacy's circumstances, she knew that challenging the girl's stubborn streak of independence was an effort in futility. Instead, Ruth quietly explained their operation. "We've got 2 high school boys that come on the weekends to handle the sleigh rides. They'll also come a couple of mornings a week to cut and load trees for the wholesale contracts as we get closer to Christmas." Stacy acknowledged the information with a nod as she took the plate of blueberry pancakes from her mother. A sigh of satisfaction escaped when the pure maple syrup, harvested locally, passed Stacy's lips. "We sell this stuff in the gift shop, right?" A sly smile lit Ruth's face. Something sweet was a sure way to spark Stacy's interest, a lesson she'd learned as the young mother of a demanding toddler. "It's an exclusive arrangement," Ruth imparted. "The Merry Hollow Tree Farm is the only marketplace for the Hawthorne family's honey and maple syrup. We even sell it online." "Online? When did you go to e-commerce?" Stacy mumbled around a mouthful of culinary delight. Crispy, thick-cut, hickory-smoked bacon, a frothy glass of cold milk, and plump, homegrown blueberries in the pancakes, swamped by real butter, pleased her palate. A pleasurable festival of rich flavors that lingered on her tongue even as the conversation continued. "I took a few of your suggestions," Ruth imparted with a satisfied grin. "The lack of tourists this year hurt the family farms and small businesses up here. I'm not sure how things are around Chattanooga, but us Yoopers are in tough financial straits. So I've got a whole gift shop filled to the brim with specialty cheeses, meat products, baked goods, handmade candies, the whole works." Thankful for the relaxed waistband on her jeans, Stacy finished her meal with gusto. As an emotional eater, this temporary sojourn at her mother's home would likely result in an expanded waistline. But who was going to care? Her pallbearers? 3 of the elderly ladies from the parish hand-tie the garlands and wreaths. At the moment, I'm still delivering supplies to them a few times a week, But they'll be working in the heated barn next week to craft the order we received for the Grand Hotel on Mackinac Island. Stacy's jaw dropped. Mom, are you serious? With an impish twinkle brightening her coffee-colored eyes, Ruth just grinned. One of our trees will be in the lobby this year, along with miles of garland for the balustrades along the front of the building. Charlie must be ecstatic, Stacy laughed, the sound echoing with genuine cheer. Ruth patted her daughter's hand and leaned in to give a celebratory hug. Somehow, God always manages to send an answer to prayer just in the nick of time. The proceeds from that order will ensure our fiscal year ends in the black. Sobering, Stacy held her mother for a moment longer before she retreated. Religion was a fool's crutch in Stacy's estimation, and until recently, Ruth refused to pander to her husband's over-the-top dependence on an imaginary friend, deity or otherwise. That's fortunate. You'll never need to worry about money again, Stacy lightly mocked, her preference for a stable income and well-managed retirement fund obvious. Ruth's frown at the jibe pricked Stacy's conscience, but there simply wasn't room in Stacy's pragmatic nature for hocus-pocus. What about you, honey? Ruth hesitantly inquired. Are you, financially strained since the divorce? Is that agency job still on the table? Gritting her teeth, Stacy shook her head. Peter refused to leave Hope Springs when the offer came through from New York, and I spent too long trying to change his mind. Astonished, Ruth stared blankly at her daughter for several long seconds. Incredulously, the stunned woman asked, You didn't talk to your husband before applying for the position? Oh, for crying out loud, Mom. It was supposed to be a surprise. Fantastic job, exciting city, new opportunities. Who knew he'd balk at the idea? Stacy, that's not a surprise. That's a sneak attack, Ruth stammered. Waving a dismissive hand at her mother's hysterics, Stacy flatly replied, Peter always supported my ambitions. Why would I think that he'd do any less when it came to my dream job? Leaning back, Ruth blinked at the bitter reprimand. Anxious to drop the subject of her failed marriage, Stacy pushed away from the table. Show me what you need to be done, Mom. One big contract isn't going to keep the tree farm going indefinitely. Chapter 4. The crisp scent of pine and the alluring ambiance of warm vanilla and hot chocolate lingered in the air as Stacy bustled around the quaint shop. Despite the governmental restrictions that hampered operational capacity, there was still a steady flow of customers thanks to a hastily implemented reservation system. Handcrafted goods placed strategically around the sales floor's perimeter lent a nostalgic flair to the otherwise modern facility. A small cafe was set up in one corner where patrons could enjoy a warm treat after their festive sleigh ride among the snow-tipped trees. And in the back, Santa's elaborate green velvet throne sat ensconced by cherry-red poinsettias. Excuse me, ma'am. I'm looking for Ruthie, a seasoned man of indeterminate age called as he approached the artfully arranged checkout counter. Putting aside the glass jar filled with peppermint sticks, Stacy glanced up and offered a wooden smile. Ruth is unavailable at the moment. Can I help you? Tilting his head slightly, Jeff Hawthorne paused and considered the cashier. You must be Stacy, he decided with a gentle smile. What gave me away? Stacy asked as she pointed one finger toward her shirt. Is it the name embroidered under the Merry Hollow logo? The light-hearted comment came across as friendly, but Jeff dismissed the awkward attempt at humor and searched the tawny eyes. Dulled by strain, the bleakness reflected in the amber depths carried despair that rocked Jeff off kilter. I've come to stock the honey and maple syrup, he quietly advised. At her mother's urging, Stacy spent the first 2 weeks in Magellan overhauling the organization and appearance of the product displays. The arduous project served as a welcome distraction from Stacy's dark reflections. With a gesture toward the food section, Stacy pointed out the new arrangement with a sense of satisfaction. This looks amazing. Jeff complimented as he surveyed the vastly improved design aesthetic and organized distribution. Who knew maple syrup could look so good? He chuckled. It should look as good as it tastes, Stacy asserted, her face brightening at the praise. Guess this explains why I'm refilling merchandise in the middle of the week, huh? That and the deer hunter's widows. Everyone's searching for affordable, practical gifts this year. And who wants to be socially distanced outside a supercenter when they could go enjoy a fun stop at a local shop? Stacy commented. When you're done restocking, I'll check in the new inventory and pull your check from last week's sales. Just give a holler when you're ready. The boxy wooden crates that housed his wares made replenishment easy, and Jeff whistled a cheerful Christmas tune as he approached the guarded woman for the promised payment. Gimme a minute, Stacy harumphed when the friendly fellow approached. I just want to finish packing this gift order for shipment before the FedEx driver shows up, she advised in a rush. Rankled by the tone, Jeff ignored the need to make a snappy comeback and found a place to wait. When Stacy waved him over 15 minutes later, the disgruntled man fought the urge to complain. Time was a valuable commodity in his busy life. All set? Stacy brusquely inquired. Jeff gave a curt nod. Despite the woman's unmistakable air of melancholy, her unabashed rudeness effectively stifled his concern, at least until the soft voice of his conscience reminded. Weep with those who weep. Putting aside his frustration, Jeff released a pent-up breath. Looks like you could use a little help around here. Yeah? Stacy stammered uncomfortably. Mom wasn't expecting it to be busy today, so she went to the rehabilitation facility to check on Charlie. They're letting her visit? Jeff responded in surprise. Most facilities were denying access to loved ones during a self-imposed quarantine. A dismal shake of her head loosened several strands of hair from Stacy's braid. Forcing the wayward flyaways into submission behind her ears, the embittered woman muttered. Mom's bundled up. She's planning to stand outside Charlie's window and talk to him. Annoyed by the continued limitations and subsequent difficulties, Jeff felt helpless to offer any type of encouragement, until his mind unearthed a bit of memory. Fear not, for I am with you, his lips whispered of their own accord. Excuse me? Stacy sharply questioned. Flushing, Jeff's startled eyes flew to the incredulous amber stare that pinned him. I just remembered a quote that seemed appropriate, he cautiously explained. People tended to dismiss him as a religious lunatic when he tried to explain the faith that sustained him. So, it's not some strange new pickup line? Stacy taunted, her interest piqued. A sweaty romp with a new partner might provide a temporary boost to her beleaguered spirit. Jeff opened his mouth to answer, and then snapped it closed when an epiphany flashed like fireworks behind his eyes. It might be. It just might be, he slowly pronounced. Fine. Meet me at that old dive bar along the back shore around 8 tonight. And if you want a quick ride afterward, bring your own protection, Stacy acknowledged before she caught sight of a customer near the cafe counter. Left gaping like a fish out of water, Jeff gathered his scattered wits and fled. Chapter 5. Easy there, Hawthorne, Jeff chided himself as he waited. The bar was packed despite the governor's capacity limits, and Jeff was stunned to find the excursion a welcome diversion from his daily routine. What are you drinking? Stacy asked as she sidled up to him at the tiny bar-top table. I'll get you another while I've got the bartender's attention. Oh, just water, he stammered. Like to live dangerously, huh? Jeff grinned, despite the vague feeling he was doing just that, living dangerously. When Stacy returned with her wine glass and the requested water, Jeff accepted the bottle with a hand that trembled. Drink quick. I want to get out of here, Stacy demanded, her libido revved by the anticipated encounter. The blood drained from Jeff's ruddy complexion. About that, he prevaricated. What? Swallowing hard, Jeff gulped back his trepidation. You, Looked like you could use a friend today. He began with hesitancy. Yeah, the feisty woman agreed. And I plan to get really, really friendly as soon as you're done with that Dasani. So drink up. Mouth dry, Jeff did as directed, nervous energy radiating off him in waves. Finally, the outclassed man plucked up his courage. I want to tell you, Jeff stammered to a halt and regrouped. There's something you should know, Stacy. Rolling her eyes, Stacy snagged the man's hand and dragged him from the bar stool. Talk while you dance, she encouraged, already swaying her hips in time to the heavy beat of Luke Owen's Down to the Honky-Tonk. Frantic to disengage, Jeff mulled the options too long. Stacy's tiny body was already grinding against him in a provocative call. Wait, he groaned when the full flavor of her wine-soaked lips found his. What? Stacy growled at the unresponsive man. I'm married, Jeff blurted. Dropping her hands from the man's waist, Stacy backed away. Fire in her tawny eyes glowed in the low light of the dance floor before she turned and stormed off. That just doesn't make sense, Ruth softly reprimanded. I've known Jeff and Lisa for years. They are the folks that introduced me to Charlie. Huddled in the corner of the sofa, Stacy tried to hold back her anguish. As a detour for the emotional firestorm, she focused on the anger that ravaged her stomach like cancer. He came on to me in the shop today. He met me for drinks. What was I supposed to think? Oh, honey, Jeff is a family therapist, so he's very attuned to other people's distress. I have to believe he was just trying to help, Ruth quietly admonished before she gently continued. If you need someone to talk to... Are you kidding me? The irate woman shrieked. I thought you'd be on my side. I thought you'd tell that jerk to take his crap and get lost. Holding up a placating hand, Ruth tried to console her wayward daughter. No, Mom. Just no. You don't get to defend that weasel. Not to me. Not if you want my help. The implied ultimatum hung between them for a single second before Stacy shattered. Fine. I'll book my flight tomorrow morning. As she fled the room, determination flooded Stacy's debilitated soul. One 7-hour flight was all that separated her from extinction. A glorious emancipation from life. Chapter 6. Hushed voices alerted Stacy to the ambush before she entered the kitchen, suitcases in tow. Her eyes narrowed as she spotted the couple seated with her mother. You've got to be kidding me, she choked. The Hawthorns will be taking you to Houghton to catch your flight, Ruth quietly shared as she excused herself. Shaking with disbelief, Stacy threw aside her luggage and raged. I don't think so. Although her husband, Jeff, often dealt with volatile family situations, it wasn't often he sought Lisa's assistance with potential clients. However, as the younger woman ranted and raved, Lisa saw the same alarming signs of distress Jeff alluded to in their conversation the night before. With gentle grace and quiet dignity, Lisa Hawthorne stood and extended a hand of welcome to Ruth's high-strung daughter. Proffered civility ignored, Lisa decided to get straight to the point. Jeff is often compelled to meet hurting folks in environments that are comfortable to them. It makes tackling tough issues a little easier to bear. So your invitation to the down low last night was accepted as a way to open a conversation. I am sorry, Stacy, Jeff added. It was never my intention to suggest a romantic interlude, but it is my fault for letting your assumptions stand past that first moment. Incensed, Stacy threw her coffee mug at the repentant man. What kind of fool do you think I am? She challenged before she turned her gaze to Lisa. He met me at that bar knowing full well what he was getting into. And if you think I'm going to buy into this whole Good Samaritan narrative, then you're as stupid as your husband. Lisa gathered a handful of paper towels and helped Jeff mop up the mess before she returned her attention to Stacy's temper tantrum. After she dropped the soggy mess into the garbage, Lisa propped a hip against the counter and patiently waited for the riled termagant to settle. The hot glare Stacy fixed on her only fueled Lisa's conviction. Yesterday in the shop, Jeff unwittingly shared a snippet of scripture with you, something that popped up in his memory. "Do not fear, for I am with you." But it was only the first part of the verse from Isaiah. There is more. It goes on to say, "Be not dismayed." "Oh, so now it's a God thing?" Stacy sneered. Yes, it is," Lisa gently replied. "I know my husband, and he has a tender heart for hurting people. But more than that, he recognized something in you that scared him. I can see it as well, Stacy. The pain that you are diligently trying to hide from prying people." Stacy snorted and flung out an arm. "Oh, and trying to hide is working so very well, isn't it?" She smirked. "Two strangers have me cornered in my mother's kitchen trying to excuse a cheater's wandering eye with some flim-flam religious mumble-jumble." Laying a protective hand over her chest, Lisa struggled to tame the deep burn of agony lodged behind her breastbone. "We have had 3 children. The youngest is still in middle school, but our son was a senior in high school last fall. As the academic year progressed, Daniel became more withdrawn, secretive, and unscrupulous in his behavior." Voice raw, Lisa rasped. "Our youngest daughter found him in the garage with a self-inflicted gunshot wound to the head shortly after the lockdowns began in March. And the verse Jeff inadvertently quoted to you? Well, it was part of the liturgy read for Daniel's memorial service at Easter. God's words were a comfort to us. 'I will strengthen you. I will help you. I will uphold you.'" Jeff continued when his wife couldn't. "I see the same torment reflected in your eyes that lived in Daniel's, and there isn't much I wouldn't do to save Ruthie from the same misery Lisa and I experienced." Compelled to reach out, Jeff stood and crossed the small space. "Even as a licensed mental health professional, I missed the signs of my son's distress, Stacy," he shared as moisture gathered in his eyes. "And when I spotted the same thing in yours, I tasted overwhelming fear." Wrapping an arm around her husband's waist, Lisa leaned into Jeff's protective embrace. The tender kiss at her temple encouraged Lisa to offer. "Until now, our pain has remained cloaked, Stacy. Very few people know what actually happened to Daniel, although some have guessed. So I can understand your hesitancy to allow our interference, I guess you'd call it." Daunted by the savage emotion displayed, Stacy stilled, her throat working convulsively to evict the lump in her throat. Unbeknownst to her, silent tears slid ponderously down Stacy's blanched cheeks. "I can't," she forlornly whispered. "Can't?" Jeff cautiously prompted. "I can't deal with this," Stacy offered before she turned and fled the room. Chapter 7. Ruth delivered a book to Stacy's room that afternoon, along with a note. "Dearest Stacy, I'm sorry if our story distressed you, but Jeff and I felt utterly compelled to share it with you. However, you left before we were able to offer you the slightest hint of solace, so I'm begging you to let me share a brief bit of comfort. God is good. He is a secure stronghold in your day of trouble. He knows your circumstances, your hurt, the dangerous thoughts that plague your troubled mind. And He has promised to provide your world-weary heart a refuge if you will only give Him a chance. With hope, Lisa Hawthorne." "Hope for hurting hearts," she read out loud with a beleaguered sigh as Stacy turned the book over in her hands. Immediately, her mind rebelled at the lofty optimism. Hope was a fruitless exercise. Nothing but a neurotic pep talk for those who refuse to face reality. Still, she flipped the paperback over and read a bit of the synopsis. Life is fragile, but hope in Christ lasts forever, the back cover insisted. Stacy harumphed, but continued reading. The Bible calls human life a vapor, a mist, a wisp of fog, a flower that springs up in the morning and fades away by mid-afternoon. We like to think we have years to pursue our goals, raise our families, and make a difference in the world, but we just don't know. The fact is, our stay on Earth is really very brief. The author, Greg Laurie, had written. A fading flower? Stacy mumbled. Somehow, she could relate to the sentiment. Her painstakingly crafted life plan was color-coded to the rainbow, a bright array of vibrant dreams and ambitions. Was Stacy enthralled by the lure of love, success, a legacy of lasting value, and a firm financial foundation? Oh, yes. Each element was defined in the most minute detail for Stacy's meticulously planned future, until one cog seized and destroyed the delicately balanced mechanism. Rolling to her stomach in the middle of the bed, Stacy dropped her head into her arms and let the morose memories shudder through her mind. A sandy-haired college boy that made her nerve endings tingle, a proudly attained master's degree, a series of promotions that put Stacy at the top of her career, and a viable offer for incredible advancement in the most progressive city in the world. Each bright recollection dimmed as volcanic ash spewed and settled atop her aspirations. Peter, she softly whimpered, grieved by the loss that toppled all else. Why couldn't you see how important that job was to me? Stacy sighed before she succumbed to emotional exhaustion. When she woke late that night, stiff and cold, Stacy gave the book an indignant shove, and it landed on the glossy hardwood floors with a thud that resounded through the house. Jittery and overwrought, Stacy quietly made her way through the dark house to the kitchen. As she prepared a mug of hot chocolate topped with a stiff measure of peppermint schnapps, the dim light of the range hood cast a glow over nearby countertops, and the resin chopping board near the stove caught her eye. Covered in bright-eyed pansies, the swirling front emblazoned on the kitchen decor proclaimed, May the God of hope fill you with all joy and peace in believing. Stacy snorted her disdain. Belief in what? A fictional character that floated around the sky? Oh, yeah, she scathingly retorted. You're just sitting around on some fluffy cloud waiting for mankind to screw up so you can send lightning bolts and judgmental old hypocrites to make us all miserable in our sin, Stacy taunted, putting particular emphasis on the last word. That's what most people believe, isn't it? Ruth softly commented from the doorway. All people expect from him is cold condemnation, and so they hide. Pulling out one of the chairs, Ruth slowly crumpled onto the seat. At least that's been my experience, she admitted. All I ever expected from my parents' fierce-faced God was reprisal and damnation. But what I never knew, all the rules and regulations of religion are nothing more than a stiff-handed legalism that negates the true spirit of God. Ah, yeah, Stacy scoffed. I seem to remember something about 10 unbreakable commandments. True, but what the ministers and priests so often forget to mention is the reason for those commandments, Ruth tenderly replied. God wanted a living, personal relationship with his people, and they refused. Instead, they asked for impersonal laws to establish God's bare minimum expectations. That way, they didn't have to face the awe-inspiring presence of God for themselves. So, the Almighty handed down a set of rigid rules they could never hope to live up to. And he carved them in stone because that bedrock mirrored the condition of the people's hearts. A bitter chuckle broke free, and Stacy jeered. Well, that is good news. Your great and mighty genie, or
God never expected me to follow the rules, so he shouldn't be disappointed that I proved him right."
Resigned to being rebuffed, Ruth straightened and fixed her sights on her daughter's harsh countenance.
"Honey, you're missing the point, and that's mostly my fault."
Ruth grieved.
"My choices made it nearly impossible for you to experience the faithful love of a father. Instead, men came and went from our home with regularity. Oh, we always had each other, and I truly tried to do my best for all three of you. Still," she tapered off. "A guilt trip, Mom? That's what your God gives you? Really?"
Stacy huffed.
"Well, let me tell you, that's something I don't need any help with. I've got guilt covered,"
she bitterly announced before coldly questioning.
"Left my husband to his own devices so I could chase my ambitions? Yep. Demanded loyalty and sacrifice from a man who loved me without reservation, just so I could reject him when his goals didn't line up with mine? Oh yeah, you can check that one off too. Then you know what I did? Just to make sure I annihilated whatever hope might have remained? I accused him of the vilest things I could imagine. Then I played victim in front of family and friends."
Stacy dumped the remainder of her hot chocolate down the drain with a violent flick of her wrist.
"So, you see, I don't need any help playing the blame game."
Ruth blocked Stacy's exit.
"No." "No?" "No, honey. No condemnation. Not from me. Not from God," Ruth fervently proclaimed. "Not when you turn over all that shame and sorrow, baby girl. Not when you find a new lease on life through him."
Chapter 8. A new lease on life? Those words haunted Stacy the whole night through. What life? What hope? What choices were viable at this pivotal juncture? Try as she might, Stacy simply couldn't fathom a path forward. With her absence at the care center, the mystery of the missing medication would become apparent when tallies started to line back up during her leave. In fact, criminal charges were a possibility if the truth was proven. An elaborate lifestyle, supported by massive debt, would undoubtedly falter as the next round of payments came due. Legal fees and nearly a month without a paycheck exhausted the minimal savings Stacy wrestled away from joint accounts before she filed the divorce papers. And the trendy townhouse she'd rented after the split recently entered the civil courts process with a pending order for eviction. Hope, she derided to the early light of dawn. What hope? From the other side of the bedroom door, Ruth heard her daughter's dismayed groan. Still, she knocked and asked,
"May I come in?" "It's Saturday, Mom. I want to sleep." "I hate to ask, Stacy, but I just got a call from Charlie's rehabilitative center, and he was dropped from the Hoyer lift by an aide during the night. I need to meet one of the facility administrators at the hospital to fill out paperwork," Ruth tearfully explained. "Can you open the shop? It's going to be a hectic day, and I need someone there to supervise all the activities and staff."
Stacy tossed the back of an arm up to cover her eyes.
"Fine," she grumbled. "Just go."
Before the cuckoo clock chimed a new hour, Stacy was knee-deep in back-to-back reservations for sleigh rides, up to her elbows with incoming wholesale orders, and under the gun to create dozens of gift baskets that needed to be shipped that afternoon. So, when Lisa Hawthorne appeared at her side, Stacy gave a curt nod and directed the extra help toward the counter, where a jolly old elf held court with overexcited children. Trailed by her teenage daughters, Lisa kept visits with Santa to their appointed times while the girls served customers at the cafe counter. Stacy surveyed the nearly empty containers, shelves, and bakery display with a petulant grunt at the end of the day. Everything would need to be restocked before they could open on Monday. "We've still got some stragglers out by the bonfire," Jeff announced as he lumbered into the shop. Blowing on his hands to warm them, the silver fox sent a cheery wink at his oldest daughter. "Any hot chocolate left, critter?" "What are you doing here?" Stacy demanded with a scowl etched across her face. Lisa rushed to intervene.
I called and asked him to bring our tractor and the hay wagon so we could accommodate the influx of unreserved guests looking to cut their own trees. Dad's the one who suggested the bonfire,
Melody chirped helpfully.
Since we couldn't get everyone inside for their hot chocolate and cookies, it worked out really well.
Stacy rolled her eyes at the youngest Hawthorne girl's enthusiasm. After nearly 12 hours on her feet, Stacy was half dead and felt cantankerous. Furthermore, she was in no mood to rehash the awkward dilemma her lack of inhibition caused earlier in the week.
Terrific,
the frazzled woman muttered to the old-fashioned Till.
Just great.
Ruth's timely arrival shifted attention from Stacy.
Oh, honey, I'm so sorry to leave all this in your lap,
the worried mother said.
But they had to transfer Charlie to the hospital in Marquette for surgery,
she confided to those gathered.
This second fall caused spinal instability that may cause paralysis.
As a unit, Jeff and Lisa gathered Ruth into a compassionate hug before they led the distressed woman to a quiet table away from the chaos. With a sense of detachment, Stacy watched the trio move away. Logically, she knew Ruth needed to be comforted, but conversely, Stacy also coveted the support offered by the Hawthorns.
Don't worry, Mrs. Whitaker,
Melody innocently soothed as she laid a hand on Stacy's shoulder.
Mom and Dad are really good about praying for people who are sick.
With a healthy dose of snark in her tone, Stacy grunted.
Praying? What good is that going to do? Did their praying help your brother?
Instantly contrite, Stacy flushed and apologized. Stunned by the callous mention of Daniel, Melody gaped at the rude lady and retreated. Then, before she could change her mind, the adolescent quietly revealed.
Danny didn't want anyone's help, ma'am. He just wanted to be free. Free from the consequences of his mistakes, I guess. At least, that's what his letter said.
A shadow stole the color from Melody's rosy cheeks as a bevy of emotions flitted across her countenance.
All I remember about Danny anymore is what was left of his face. He still looked sad.
Chapter 9. Undone by Melody's scattered recollections, Stacy's nightmares reflected the traumatized girl's tragic final memory of her brother. He still looked sad morphed into she still looked sad as the dream cycled through Stacy's mind. Visions of her mother's face ravaged by the same grief she'd seen on Melody's shook the disenchanted woman's resolve.
I can't, Mama,
Stacy sobbed in her sleep.
I can't.
Locked in her own state of emotional chaos, Ruth's tear-hazed eyes slipped open at the first cry from the next room. Softly padding down the hall, Ruth heard the heart-rending misery in her daughter's distressed exclamations.
Honey, wake up. It's just a dream, she tenderly cajoled. Stacy, I'm here.
Ruth tried again as her tortured child continued to thrash. Conscious thought pushed away the wicked tendrils of dread as Stacy woke. As she slipped into a seated position, her mother slowly dropped to the mattress next to Stacy's hip. The soft touch of Ruth's silky fingertips against her forehead soothed the anxious lines from Stacy's brow.
What is it, Mom? Is Charlie okay?
She hoarsely mumbled.
You had a bad dream,
Ruth explained with a weak smile.
Oh,
Stacy flatly acknowledged.
Charlie's all right then? The surgeon called about an hour ago to update me on his progress, and he's hopeful that Charlie will regain a satisfactory level of mobility.
Lamely, Stacy uttered, That's good.
Please talk to me, honey. It's not good to keep everything bottled up inside. Peter divorced me. What more is there to say?
Stacy warily reminded as she subtly moved away from Ruth's touch.
You know about Daniel Hawthorne, and you know why Jeff and Lisa approached you. Not only did they confirm the legitimacy of my concerns about your state of mind, but they recognized a danger I did not see. And I can't bear to lose another of my children, Stacy,
Ruth brokenly entreated.
I don't know what to say, Mom. Everything's just too messed up. There's no fixing it. Any of it.
Reacting to the finality of that statement, Ruth let her tears fall.
What could possibly make you so sure of that? You know how I am.
A soft nod of understanding prefaced Ruth's disturbed sigh.
You've always been a very determined person, and that isn't a bad thing. I've watched you soar, honey. You've reached for your dreams every day of your life. But a change of circumstances, a setback, isn't the end of the world, Stacy. Life is full of disappointments and challenges, and each time we prevail over the things that want to break us, well, we get stronger. Our purpose becomes clearer. That all sounds good in theory, Mom, but living in the poorhouse isn't appealing. Being a 35-year-old divorcee is humiliating, and nothing's going to change that.
No, Ruth agreed.
But time will soften the blow, she promised.
Squirming further away, Stacy drew her knees toward her chest and contemplated the unrelenting woman beside her.
You can't be sure of that,
Stacy finally concluded.
When your father walked out shortly before your 3rd birthday, I had no concept of how to manage a budget or deal with the creditors. My work experience was limited to housekeeping, and jobs were scarce up here even then. Grandma and Grandpa offered us a place to stay, but I couldn't bear the thought of moving home. So I took up with the first man who offered me a tiny bit of affection, and I think you recall enough of your childhood to understand the results of those terrible choices.
Stacy's nod of understanding prompted Ruth to continue.
I spent nearly 30 years flitting in and out of temporary relationships looking for my Prince Charming. And when I finally found him, well, he certainly wasn't what I expected.
Charlie's a good guy, even if he's a little over the top with the religion stuff, Stacy agreed. Ruth ran a trembling hand through her thinning hair. The golden blonde faded into silver a little more each day. Nervously, she fingered a tiny curl near the nape of her neck.
Charlie is an amazing husband, and it is his faith that makes him so. But he isn't who I was referring to,
Ruth quietly commented. Chapter 10. Gathered around the kitchen table during the bleakest hours before dawn, Stacy examined her mother's careworn features.
"Who is he?"
she finally asked. Ruth stilled. Her reserved nature balked at laying out her sordid past for open commentary, but the nudge at her heart said there wasn't another choice.
"You don't know him." "Mom!"
Holding up a hand for silence, Ruth braved the risk of insult and began.
"I met him 2 years ago at a small gathering, and when he spoke to me, my heart went haywire. Every longing and unfulfilled desire, he met each and every one with gentle compassion and overwhelming love. I told him everything about my past. He still embraced me. It boggled my mind that anyone could care that much for me. Oh, but he did."
"Well, what happened? How in the heck did you end up with Charlie then?"
"Charlie's the one that introduced us,"
Ruth whispered as she turned the wedding band on her finger.
"You're two-timing Charlie?"
Stacy bellowed.
"How could you?" "Have you ever experienced true, uncompromised, unfailing love? Have you ever been so perfectly held and protected that you knew beyond a shadow of a doubt you were safe from all harm?"
Ruth shyly asked.
"I spent over 40 years of my life looking for a fairy tale ending, but until I met him, this other man—"
Ruth softly sighed, and a smile lit her face with a glow that was visible even in the dim light. Dumbfounded, Stacy glared at her mother's animated expression. The string of uncles that meandered through her childhood were often ill-tempered and uncommonly rude when it came to Ruth's baggage, or children, as they were most commonly called, and by Stacy's count, there hadn't been a single one worthy of a second glance. There certainly hadn't been any that made Ruth's eyes shine and cheeks flush. Aggravated by the tawdry deception, but intrigued nonetheless, Stacy grumbled. "So how come I've never met Mr. Wonderful?"
"He is wonderful,"
Ruth enthusiastically confirmed.
"I was talking to him, telling him about Charlie's surgery when you cried out. And he almost had me settled down before the interruption. Oh, don't take that the wrong way," the blissfully happy woman teased when she noticed Stacy's brows draw together. "I'm thankful that I can finally tell you about him, honey, and I really do want to introduce you." "So this guy knows about Charlie, and it's okay with him? What kind of crazy, mixed-up love triangle are you involved in, Mom?" Laughter bubbled from Ruth in giddy abandon. "Oh, honey, Charlie is totally on board with the whole idea. In fact, we're convinced having this third party in the picture makes our marriage unbreakable." Agog, Stacy's mouth dropped open, and her tongue lolled out. "For crying out loud, what have you two been smoking?" "Ha!" Ruth quipped. "This isn't a hippie-inspired love fest, and there aren't any hallucinogenics involved." "Mother!" Stacy admonished, drawing the word out to an exaggerated degree. "Honey, it's very simple. The not-so-secret husband of my heart is a man who lived 2,000 years ago. He took my place so that I wouldn't be condemned to death. And because of that magnificent love, I am free, free from a sordid past, relieved of all the guilt I carried. His name is Jesus, and I know you've heard of him." In the intervening silence, Stacy's jaw fell open and snapped shut several times before she finally uttered, "You're mad as the Hatter." Ruth took the staunch rebuke in stride and let a broad smile overtake her face. "Well, I have your attention now, don't I?" "You purposely made me think you were having some torrid affair with a geriatric Romeo," Stacy huffed. "There have been more affairs in my life than I can count," Ruth conceded. "Yet there is nothing that comes close in comparison to the relationship I have with Jesus. And because of that close, personal connection, my marriage and my entire life have taken on dimensions I cannot even begin to explain." "Yay for you," Stacy snarked. Unwilling to let the conversation devolve into something trite, Ruth shored up her reserves and rejoined. "If you are at the end of your rope and can't see any way out of the situation that you're in, then what do you have to lose, Stacy? A trip to the morgue?" Anger rolled Stacy's stomach. The flight or fight response shot her forward from the dining room chair, but Ruth caught Stacy's hand. "The whole savior thing is passé, cliché, a relic of ignorant superstition," Stacy coldly enunciated. "You can believe or disbelieve, honey. That's entirely up to you. I can only tell you what I know from my personal experience. But make no mistake, the love of God is as real as anything you will ever know. It gives you a strength and a surety that is otherwise unfathomable," Ruth gently assured. "And when everything else in your life is so far beyond your control, there is an unfailing sense of comfort in knowing that God is on your side, no matter what the battle might entail." Chapter 11. Stacy ignored her mother's attempt at light conversation over breakfast the next morning. "Go on without me," she urged when Ruth requested her presence at church that morning. "The Thanksgiving week service is always something special, honey. I'd be happy to have the company." Ruth tried again. "Mother, I listened to everything you had to say during the wee hours, but now you need to listen to me. I'll help you until the Christmas rush is over. I owe you that much, but that's where it ends. When I leave here, it will be our final goodbye, and nothing is going to change that." Reduced to tears by the pronouncement, Ruth turned ashen, a gray pall settling over her grim features. With a palm settled near her nauseated stomach, Ruth fled the kitchen. Another layer of guilt settled over Stacy's bruised conscience. It had never been Stacy's intention to voice her plans to anyone, but her mother's repeated interference? It required an immediate, definitive answer. She's unshakable,
Ruth wept. Lisa denied the statement with an adamant toss of her head.
No, I won't believe that, Ruthie. Stacy may be stubborn, but she certainly isn't stupid. That's the problem,
Ruth raggedly answered.
Her mind filters everything through what can be proven. It won't allow the intimate knowledge of something beyond her understanding to seep into her heart.
Then we know what to do, Jeff comforted. Jesus gave sight to the blind, and that's what we'll ask him to do for Stacy. We'll ask him to open the eyes of her heart. Turning to the rest of the people in their small group, Jeff temporarily relinquished his leadership duties. Then he hurried away to apprise the pastor of the urgent prayer request. "7 and 7, Stacy counted, lining up the rows of pills side by side. 14, she woodenly laughed at the convergence of numbers. It seemed serendipitous that her demise would be a strange inversion of the same numerals that marked her birth date. Born on July the 14th and relieved of existence by 14 pills taken in sets of 7. Stacy's analytical brain loved spontaneous symmetry. On a strange burst of inspiration, Stacy bundled up and grabbed the lethal cocktail of pills. With a bottle of Honey House mead tucked safely in her grasp, the determined woman marched into the woods and found an enormous jack pine to stretch out beneath. "I love you, Mama. Don't cry for me," Stacy softly toasted before she swallowed the first handful of artificial consolation. The cold, uncomfortable ground bit at Stacy's back as she sprawled out under the giant evergreen. Arms outstretched, Stacy waited for the welcome darkness and subsequent freedom from all her cares. But her mind returned to the nightmares that plagued her restless dreams. The specters more garish, the scenes more grisly, the heartbreak more acute. And, instead of fading into silent oblivion, sounds of war grew nearer. Cries of torment crescendoed. Shrieks of terror and mayhem pummeled incessantly against Stacy's eardrums until they exploded. Even then, the noise grew louder, the pressure inside her skull more intense. "Stop!" She tried to wail, yet her voice went unheard. The slurred rebuke unformed by paralyzed lips as the final breath left Stacy's body. Blackness pressed against Stacy's eyeballs until they burst. The fluid drained from the shattered orbs and burned scarlet trails over the stretched skin of her face until the acrid taste swept into her mouth and scorched her tongue. Gagging as the vicious river melted away everything in her oral cavity, Stacy's dying body convulsed as her lungs starved. Her bowels and bladder loosed, and the stench detonated like napalm. As unmitigated horror drew her fully into its deadly embrace, Stacy's mind screamed for mercy. Then came the darkness. Chapter 12. Melody Hawthorne tightly grasped Ruth's hand and traced small, soothing circles there. "Don't give up, Ruthie. It only takes a mustard seed of faith. Just believe," the young lady quietly directed. Lifting her tear-washed face, Ruth softly nodded. Confined to the back of the Hawthorne's minivan, Ruth struggled to whisper even the simplest of prayers. Somewhere inside the small hospital, a team of medical professionals worked over Stacy's lifeless form. Naloxone administered at the scene brought her daughter a small window of time. But the wait? Oh, how Ruth's soul ached as her grieved heart silently cried out for mercy. The shrill trill of Ruth's cell phone sent a surge of trepidation through her at light speed, and she bobbled the necessary nuisance. Fortunately, Melody's quick reflexes interrupted the iPhone's fall, and Ruth hollowly answered the crucial call. "They got her on time. They got her on time. They got her on time," Ruth slowly, breathlessly repeated with prayer-like intensity as she disconnected. "But I'm so afraid," she wept. "What will keep her from trying again?" "Just a mustard seed," Melody gently reminded. "That's all the bigger your faith needs to be. God will take care of the rest." This is all you need," Ruth quietly answered as she filled in the tiny circle. Withdrawing her hand, Stacy looked into her open palm and found the ink spot. Sullenly, she mumbled, "What is this?" Lifting her hand, Ruth displayed a similar dot. "Whenever life seems too big to handle today, just look at that mark, Stacy. That itty-bitty speck of hope is all you need to make it one more minute." Stacy shrugged and looked away. What choice was there? Instead of the peaceful obscurity she'd craved, Stacy found a hellish portal on the other side of mortality, a door to incurable horror, the oily stains of which still clung to her fractured soul. "I smell turkey," came the joyful shout from the front of the house. Ruth embraced her daughter before she turned to meet the Thanksgiving Day guests. But Stacy's facetiously muttered, "Yeah, there's so much to be grateful for this year," pierced Ruth's heart. After the feast, Stacy stiffly moved through the afternoon with resigned determination. The final eviction notice for her townhouse was in the mail that accumulated while she'd been on the psych hold. So Darren and his wife offered to take a short working vacation to Chattanooga to move her out. "Ship what you want and sell the rest," Stacy flatly directed. "Hey, Nugget, don't take it so hard," her big brother cajoled, giving her shoulder a nudge. "Mom will keep you busy, and you've got a place to stay. How bad can it be?" The question was good-naturedly echoed in various ways for the remainder of the day until she managed to escape the house. Outside in the brisk early evening air, Stacy doggedly traced the path to the Jack Pine. The empty mead bottle stood sentinel as a reminder of Stacy's shock-filled glimpse into eternity. "Feel like company?" Melody asked, drawing her jacket tighter to ward off the late November cold. "Not really." "Oh, well, I just wanted to get a look at this granddaddy before they cut him down tomorrow," Melody offered. "When I was little, I would hide under the branches and look up through the boughs. There's a spot about 10 feet up where a sucker swerves off at a weird angle." "Sucker?" Yeah. Another tree that started growing in the same spot at the same time. It must have been grafted in by the bigger tree," Melody theorized. "However it happened, it makes a perfect crossbeam." Stacy remembered the odd characteristic. "They're cutting it down?" "Sure. This is the tree that's going to Mackinac Island," Melody enthusiastically explained. "Can you imagine what it will look like when it's decorated? Oh, I wish I could see." Inspired, the teenager wiggled under the tree and sprawled out in a posture similar to Stacy's earlier in the week. "Come look," she encouraged. Chapter 13. Protected in the lee of the branches, the bite of the November wind was mitigated, and with another body nearby, that small bit of warmth made the shelter more comfortable. "This tree reminds me of the cross they put in the sanctuary for Easter," Melody offered. "That was one of my favorite hiding spots as a kid, secluded among the lilies where no one could see me." "You're kind of strange," Stacy jeered without malice. A lilting chuckle escaped, and Melody grinned. "My dad would agree with you," she gleefully retorted. "But it is an amazing sight, you know? The ladies who decorate for the holidays drape a purple piece of fabric from the wood. Then they surround the cross's foundation with Easter lilies, hyacinths, and tulips," Melody explained. "A couple of years ago, I was laying there one night while my parents were in a meeting, and the sanctuary was kind of dark. So the view from the base looked just like this," she said, pointing up the trunk of the tree. "But that silky piece of fabric fell and slid over my face just like a tender, peaceful caress. And it just made me feel so loved, you know? Like when your mom brushes her hand across your forehead when you don't feel good? How that one thing just makes you feel so much better?" Stacy acknowledged the girl's rambled explanation with a subtle nod, but she couldn't relate. At least, she couldn't connect with the sensation anymore. Somewhere along the line, happiness had drifted into duty, and duty morphed into something rigid and bitter and obstinate. As dusk began to gather, Stacy stared up into the tangle of wood and pine needles. Sweat gathered on her brow, and Stacy's heartbeat drummed behind her breastbone. With precise recall, she felt the crushing weight of the darkness as it pressed into her Sunday morning. The breath backed up in Stacy's lungs as she suffocated in the unseen void.
"You okay?"
Melody asked in concern. Shuddering, Stacy stiffly answered, "Bad memory." Quietly, Melody gently replied,
"I know what happened here."
With precise movements, the adolescent removed her mitten and held up her hand. The lack of light made it impossible to see the bit of ink that marred Melody's palm, but she knew it was there, and she laid a fingertip on the mark. Stillness lingered, a hush presided over by the last rays of daylight. With sudden insight, Melody pulled the tiny penlight from her pocket and cast its glow into the tree overhead.
"Jesus is like a light in the darkness," she whispered. "And when the night is black and the shadows are deep, his light shines all the brighter."
"Kid, I need a whole lot more than a flashlight can offer," Stacy grumbled.
"Why? Isn't this tiny beam enough to see what's right in front of you?"
"You people just won't give up, will you?" the weary woman carped.
"No, never."
Stacy scooted out into the wind and stood. The inky press of evening pulsated against her eyeballs, yet hints of luminance peeked between the branches. "Come out of there, Melody. We'll need that light of yours to get home."
"See, I told you,"
the sassy teenager cheerfully quipped when she appeared.
"All you need is a lamp for your feet, a light for your path."
Irked by the girl's odd insistence, Stacy ignored Melody's humming until they were within sight of the house.
"When I feel afraid, think I've lost my way,"
the sweet voice sang,
"still, you're there right beside me."
"I get it. You think your flashlight friend is going to make everything better. Can you stop with the concert now?" Stacy grumbled.
"Nothing will I fear, as long as you are near,"
Melody continued with a wink as she warbled.
"Please be near me to the end."
"Kid, you're making me nuts. Enough with the solo." Melody laughed.
"Make you a deal,"
she prompted. "Anything to get you to stop singing," Stacy agreed.
"Have dessert with Mom and me when we get back to the house, and I'll give you the whole spiel in less time than it takes to get through the Mount of Cool Whip on a piece of pumpkin pie."
Chapter 14. Either the girl had insider information, or it was a safe assumption that everyone dumped half a container of whipped cream on their Thanksgiving pastry. Whatever the case might be, Stacy figured if the 3-minute ordeal saved her another off-key recital, she'd be happy. Well, as happy as a suicidal divorcee could be, anyway. "And go," Lisa genially said when Stacy scooped the first bit of creamy delight onto her fork. Melody wiggled in anticipation and started off rapid fire.
"It's as simple as ABC."
Holding up one finger, she stated,
"Admit you've done stuff that's wrong."
A second finger went up.
"Then believe that Jesus took the punishment in your place for all that stuff."
And before Melody rocked off her chair in excitement, Lisa interjected softly,
"And lastly, commit yourself to a personal relationship with the Prince of Peace."
Prince of Peace? That rang a bell in Stacy's head. Still, there was a whole lot more to it than the duo suggested.
"Uh-huh. And then there are thousands of pages of rules and regulations to follow, right? Do this, don't do that, go to church 5 times a week, give away all your money." "Nope, that's it,"
Melody enthused.
"You say, 'Jesus, I want to get to know you. I want that peace, and I know there's nothing I can do to get it for myself. Done deal.'"
A critical eyebrow winged toward Stacy's hairline in disbelief.
"Kid, I went to catechism classes when I was your age. I know there's a catch. I've read the fine print."
Stepping in behind her daughter, Ruth laid a hand on Stacy's shoulder.
"You're focusing on the outside stuff, honey. This renewal is an inside transaction. Think of it as a fresh start, Lisa encouraged. You exchange death for life. You are reborn as an entirely new creation. And in the process, you find an extraordinary strength, a powerful purpose, and a companion that is everything you will ever need. Swiping up the last bit of Cool Whip with her finger, Stacy licked away the remainder of her dessert. "Time's up," she announced. The gospel firing squad faded back, concern etched on each face. "Why is this so important to you?" Stacy asked Melody. "You don't even know me." Moisture welled in the teenager's pale blue eyes. "Have you ever felt worthless? So full of shame that you couldn't look at yourself in the mirror?" Melody dropped her head and stared at her lap. "Do you know what it's like to smile and laugh, even though you hurt so bad inside you can barely breathe?" Stacy blanched. "Does that little voice inside your head ever shout horrible things at you, Stacy? If you know what I mean, then you know what I felt like when Daniel died." Melody sniffed. "He was my favorite person in the world, and when he told me that he wanted to eat a bullet, I laughed at him, teased him. I didn't think he was serious, but there he was the next day, or what was left of him, splattered all over the wall of our garage." Lisa bit back a startled cry. "Oh, Melody! Why? Why didn't you say anything?" "I let Daniel die, Mom. How could you ever forgive me? How could anyone ever forgive me?" Melody brokenly cried before she lifted her tortured face. The transformation was subtle at first, but as Stacy watched, the girl's sorrow faded. A tender smile replaced the grimace of anguish, and her cheeks bloomed with color. "I've spent so much time under that big jack pine where we found Stacy. There's a cross formation embedded into the tree trunk, and I wasted hours studying it. I'd look up at the bits of blue sky showing through the branches and wonder if Daniel was up there somewhere." Lisa reached over and wrapped her youngest child in a firm embrace. "It wasn't your fault, sweetheart." Melody nodded in agreement. "I know that now, Mom. One day while I was there, it started to rain. At first, I didn't realize it. The tree cover protected me. When the first bits of moisture hit my face, I was half asleep and dreaming of the Easter cross they put up every year at church. I could smell the lilies," she explained with a half smile. "But in the hazy place between waking and sleep, I felt those drops and thought they were blood dripping on my face. Blood from Jesus making me clean and whole again." Melody fixed her gaze on Stacy. "You laid there with me today, at the foot of that cross. Don't you want to be whole too?" A hush fell over the house. Voices quieted, bodies stilled, and Stacy's heart thundered. It is the overwhelming, never-ending love of God. We can't earn it, and we certainly don't deserve it. Ruth whispered into the quiet. Your heart just knows. Why does it matter? Stacy asked without rancor. When circumstances have torn your world apart and left you broken, it matters, Lisa wept. Jeff placed his hands on his wife's shoulders. Or when everything you've spent your life building up goes in smoke, he suggested. It matters. Every time a relationship, a friendship, or a partnership shatters, he matters, Ruth explained. When those betrayals cut deep and leave you with wounds that will not heal, that is when you can feel the enormity of his love so powerfully. Your knees will buckle. Melody laid a palm over her chest. That loneliness that eats at you, it just can't be satisfied any other way. That's what I saw in Daniel's life when he tried to fill in the blanks with alcohol and a new girlfriend every week. Then that mind-numbing emptiness hit me when I lost my best friend. There was no one I could talk to, she faintly murmured. And I didn't want anyone else to know what I had done to my big brother. just when he needed me most." The earnest declarations pierced Stacy's armor. Well, thank you," she responded with genuine respect. "You've given me something to think about." Chapter 15. Stacy tossed and turned that night as her mind played over the impassioned statements shared around the dinner table. So, when she heard the lilt of her mother's voice through the wall, Stacy snuck from her bed and moved toward Ruth's bedroom. From the doorway, Stacy could pick up the softly uttered pleas her mother issued toward the ceiling. "You okay, Mom?" "Just talking to Mr. Wonderful," Ruth tried to tease unsuccessfully. Stacy stepped into the room and approached the bed. "You're really, really weird, Mother." "It's hereditary, you know," Ruth retorted. With a snort, Stacy playfully grumbled. "Terrific. Guess that means I'm going to turn into one of those scary church ladies too, huh?" "That is my most sincere hope," Ruth quietly acknowledged. "I can't bear the thought of losing you, honey. Not in this life, and certainly not for the span of eternity. Is it really as easy as Melody makes it out to be? This new chance at life?" Ruth nodded vigorously. "Absolutely. Salvation is a gift that is already bought and paid for, honey. All you have to do is claim it." "Mom, I don't know how." "Just talk to him, Stacy. Give him the fractured pieces and acknowledge that you cannot do it on your own. That need for strength and guidance and comfort all point to him." "Well, that's easy enough. My life is so screwed up, I don't even know where to begin picking up the pieces. It's the believing part that hangs me up. What exactly am I buying into here?" Ruth searched for an easy explanation that wasn't filled with religious speak. In the end, she decided to field some questions. "Ever done anything you regret?" "Of course." Chuckling, Ruth admitted. You and me both. No one gets out of this life without messing up somewhere along the line. So the question becomes, can you live a perfect life? Keep all those rules and regulations you remember from catechism class?" "You're kidding, right?" Stacy groaned. "If that's what you're expecting from me, we're done right now." "That is the expectation, and it's impossible to live up to, isn't it? God knew we'd never qualify for that standard of perfection, so he made another way," the quiet woman imparted. "All the consequences of our actions, everything we deserve to suffer, Jesus took the punishment in our place. The death penalty is erased from our record, and we get all of the blessings that we were unable to earn on our own." Stacy's mouth gaped open. "Why would he do that?" "Love. A love so rich and so abundant. I just can't fathom the unparalleled vastness of something so amazing." After a moment of consideration, Stacy asked, "And this gift, it's free? No strings attached?" Ruth faltered for a moment, then her explanation slowly emerged. "When you and Peter fell in love, what were your expectations?" A grimace flitted across Stacy's face. Wrong question to ask, because apparently my assumptions weren't reasonable, according to Peter. Stilted silence stretched as her mother waited for an answer. All right. I expected all the stuff that they mentioned in the marriage vows. You know, love, honor, cherish, yada, yada, yada." "So would it be reasonable for Jesus to anticipate some type of commitment from you?" "Mother, just give me a straight answer." "When you begin a personal relationship with Jesus, he is going to ask for your love and fidelity, just like any other lover might." "Lover?" Stacy stuttered. Ruth smiled at her daughter's disgruntled moo. "Lover of your soul, Miss Hot Pants. And eventually, I think you'll find the same joy I've found with Charlie. My Mr. Wonderful loves to give extravagant gifts. And a true mate to share your life with? Well, that's one of the best ones."
Stacy spent a few minutes fiddling with a string at the hem of her thermal t-shirt before summarizing.
Melody said something about ABCs. So we've got to admit the need, believe, and receive, and then there's one more, right? Some people attribute the C in the acrostic to the word confess, but I prefer the word claim. Just like you took Peter's surname on your wedding day, you claim the name of Jesus in your life. And the best part is that once the claim is made, you get to proclaim it to everyone. Shout it from the rooftops, because a love like this is going to make your spirit soar.
The joy in Ruth's voice penetrated the fog of Stacy's disenchantment, and a slow tingle shot through every vessel in her body. At a nearly inaudible level, Stacy began to share every ragged emotion and need with Mr. Wonderful, and with each admission, a fearsome weight fell from her shoulders. As the soft luminance of daybreak stole into the room, an ethereal glow fell on Stacy's bent head.
"I'm free, Mama. I'm finally free,"
she jubilantly whispered. Epilogue.
"Welcome home, Charlie,"
Stacy exuberantly called when her stepfather waved from the open window of the late-model sedan. The first flowers of spring poked impudently through the last of the winter's snowy blanket, and pot-bellied robins flitted about in search of items to line their nests. Everywhere Stacy looked, there was evidence of new life, especially when she glanced into a mirror. The hard edges of her frustrated face now softened into an easier smile, and the sarcastic wit Stacy often used to protect herself became a relic of the past. Although the consequences of her fall into disgrace hadn't magically disappeared after Stacy's transformation, the residue of her former life slowly became more manageable. New friends, stable employment, and a fresh purpose in life put a genuine smile on Stacy's face. As her relationship with God grew deeper, sweeter, and more poignant, Stacy began to understand the reckless, boundless, unfettered love that rescued her from a miry pit of despair. Serenity replaced the scathing self-rebuke, and joyful anticipation displaced dread.
"Oh, who is that?"
Stacy stammered to her mother as a towering fellow stepped from the driver's side. Ruth bit back a grin and serenely answered,
"You mean Matt? I've mentioned him, haven't I? He's Charlie's home health nurse."
Interest sparked in Stacy's eyes.
"Home?"
she exclaimed.
"This home? He's staying here?"
"That's the plan," Ruth slyly answered, a mysterious smile stretching her cheeks wide. Jabbing an elbow into Stacy's side, Ruth cryptically observed,
"Perhaps he's a special delivery from Mr. Wonderful."
Afterward. The overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God is matchless in value when it comes to defeating the ominous shadows in your life. His passionate call to every weary soul offers peace, promise, power, and purpose to anyone who comes to him with heart in hand. If your mind declares such things foolishness, then I mourn for you. The paltry joy you've experienced through your own efforts will be the pinnacle of your life, and the most profound sorrow will only be the start of your grief. God can and will offer you so much more than anything you can ever hope to accomplish on your own. For those of you that cling to hope, yet find so little to sustain your weary soul, let me offer you the sweetest of assurances. God will keep you in perfect peace. The joy he offers is immutable because it depends on him and not the circumstances that surround you. And if you wonder how I can speak with such surety, then let me simply say, I've seen it and felt it in my own life 100,000 different ways. Today, the choice is yours, a life crushed by crisis or a love that will set you free. Choose wisely. Time is short, and the embrace of darkness binds more tightly with each passing moment. God's clarion call is this: fear not, for I am with you. Be not dismayed, for I am your God. The ABCs of salvation presented in Stacy's story are the blueprint to a new life in Christ. A simple 3-step plan to usher you into a place of peace and renewed joy. Admit your self-sufficient pride and acknowledge the need for redemption. Believe that Jesus died in your place and removed the spiritual death penalty from your life. Claim the free gift of eternal life by confessing your need, and state your desire to begin a personal relationship with God. Elaborate prayers are not what God requires. He just wants to hear your heart speak to Him as a well-loved child would with their father. Give Him all your cares, ask for His forgiveness, and accept the beautiful gift of new life, eternal life, found only in Jesus. If you've chosen to accept the gift of a new beginning with Jesus, I would love to hear your story. And if there are questions that still plague your heart, please feel free to contact me via email at author@michelepollockdalton.com. That's MichelePollockDalton.com. This story, in all of its forms, will always remain free for you to share. Links can be found on my website at www.michelepollockdalton.com. As a new child of God, you will want to find people who will nurture you and help you grow in your daily relationship with God. Cornerstone Church in San Antonio, Texas, has a spectacular online ministry that will be a cherished resource as you move forward with your new life. Find them at www.sacornerstone.org. Other online ministries you may want to investigate can be found at www.jdfarag.org and www.harvest.org. God bless. This has been Spirit of Christmas, Suddenly Serene, Hope for the Holidays series, Book 2. Written by Michele Pollock Dalton. Narrated by Rick Barr. Copyright 2020 by Michele Pollock Dalton. Production copyright by Michele Pollock Dalton.